Hello. I thought I had everything figured out. Life was going smoothly, or so I believed. I was 26 years old, and for the past 4 years, I had been in a committed relationship with Emma. We met through mutual friends, and from the moment we clicked, everything felt natural. After 5 years of knowing each other, and 4 of them spent dating, marriage seemed like the obvious next step. Last summer, Emma casually brought up the idea of getting married. At first, I was caught off guard. We had talked about the future before, but I never expected the conversation to arrive so soon. Still, after some thought, I realized it made sense. I loved her, and she loved me, or so I thought. We planned a spring wedding for the upcoming year, and everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. By New Year's, I had bought a ring. I wanted to make it official. I proposed. She said yes, and she even surprised me with a ring of her own on Valentine's Day. From the outside, it looked like a picture-perfect relationship, but deep down, something was nagging at me, a small, almost imperceptible feeling that something was off. I could not put my finger on it, but I pushed it aside, thinking it was just the stress of planning a wedding. That nagging feeling came roaring back one morning when Emma was away on a 2-day work trip. It was just a regular day, nothing special. I was working from home, as I often did, and using the home PC. Emma worked for a bank, and her company had strict policies about not opening personal emails on work devices, so she often used our shared computer for that. Normally, I stuck to my work laptop, but that day, it had crashed, forcing me to use the home PC. I logged in as usual and continued working. I barely noticed the minimized window in the corner of the screen. It was Emma's email account, left open from the last time she used the computer. At first, I did not think anything of it. But then something happened that changed everything. A notification popped up. The sender's name? Felix. My stomach turned. I recognized the name instantly. Felix was Emma's ex-boyfriend from college, someone she had dated for years before we met. She had told me about him once, mentioning how they broke up when he moved back to his home country. It seemed like ancient history, until now. I hesitated, staring at the notification. A part of me wanted to close the email without looking. But that feeling, that nagging suspicion, wouldn't let me ignore it. Something compelled me to click on the message. And that was when my world began to unravel. The email was not what I expected. It was not just some casual conversation or a polite exchange. It was so much worse. Emma's words hit me like a slap in the face. She had written to Felix, "I miss you every day. I can't stop thinking about the nights we had, the way you touched me, the way I still crave you." My breath caught in my throat. I scrolled down, reading more, unable to tear my eyes away from the screen. There was a long thread of emails, dating back months, maybe even longer. I could not believe what I was seeing. Emma had been writing to Felix in vivid detail, describing her fantasies, her desires, and, worst of all, how she still longed for him. One email stood out. She wrote, "Sometimes, when I'm with James, I close my eyes and pretend it's you. It's the only way I can feel satisfied. Do you remember that night in the hotel? I still think about it every time." The words felt like a punch to the gut. I had no idea how to process what I was reading. Emma, the woman I was supposed to marry, had been emotionally, and maybe even physically, cheating on me for months. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the messages. They were raw, explicit, and filled with a longing I had never seen in her when she was with me. One message after another, she described how she thought about him when she was alone, how she touched herself thinking about him, how she craved his touch. She even complained about our relationship, saying how unsatisfied she was, how my body did not compare to his. It was as though she was living 2 separate lives, one with me and one in her head, with Felix. A cold wave of realization washed over me. I had been blind. All those moments where I thought everything was fine, where I thought our relationship was solid, those were lies. She had been living a lie, and I had been her fool. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind was racing, 1,000 thoughts and emotions swirling inside me. How long had this been going on? How could I have missed this? What was I supposed to do now? The wedding was only weeks away. How could I face her? How could I face anyone? I sat there, staring blankly at the wall, trying to figure out what to do next. Confront her? Ghost her? I had no idea. All I knew was that my life had just turned upside down. For hours, I sat in the same spot, my mind in a whirlwind. My fiancée had been cheating on me, right under my nose, and I had no idea how to handle it. Confronting her seemed impossible. How would I even begin that conversation? But ghosting her, leaving without a word, felt like the coward's way out. I needed time to think. I decided to take action before she returned from her trip. I did not want to see her, did not want to hear her excuses, her lies. So, I made a plan. First, I called a locksmith. The locks on the house had to be changed. I couldn't stand the thought of her walking back in like nothing had happened. Then, I packed my essentials, clothes, personal items, and got out of the house as fast as I could. I had no idea where I was going, but anywhere was better than staying there. I found a small, cheap motel on the edge of town and checked in for a few days. It was a dive, nothing like the comfort of home, but it gave me the space I needed to figure things out. The room was cold and smelled like mildew, but I didn't care. I just needed to be alone with my thoughts. Once I was settled, I began systematically dismantling the life Emma and I had built together. I canceled the wedding venue, the photographer, and everything else we had booked for the big day. Most of the vendors were understanding and offered partial refunds. Next, I packed all of her things into boxes, hired a moving company, and sent everything to a storage unit. I left the storage receipt at the front door of the house, a simple note attached. Your things are in storage. Do not contact me. As I did all of this, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from Emma. She was oblivious, sending me sweet notes about how her trip was going, how she missed me, and how excited she was to get home. The irony was nauseating. I ignored every single message. I didn't block her yet. I wanted to see her reaction when she got home and found everything gone. Part of me wondered if she had any idea that her secret was out. Would she figure it out on her own? Or would she come back, acting like everything was fine? The thought of her walking into an empty house filled me with a strange sense of satisfaction. The last thing I did was withdraw my share of the money from our joint wedding account. I left her the rest, but I took what was mine. It felt like the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. I was done. Now, all I had to do was wait. Emma returned 2 days later, just as I had predicted. I watched from a distance as she pulled into the driveway, smiling as if she had no idea what was about to happen. She stepped out of the car, suitcase in hand, and walked up to the front door. I could see the confusion on her face as she fumbled with her keys, trying to unlock the door. When she realized the key no longer worked, she knocked, calling my name. When there was no answer, she checked her phone, sending me a text. I ignored it, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched from my hidden vantage point. She knocked again, louder this time, her voice more urgent. I could see the panic starting to set in. She tried calling me, but I let it ring. Her calls went to voicemail, one after the other. She stood there for a long time, staring at the locked door, before finally noticing the note I had left with the storage receipt. I watched as she unfolded the paper, her face growing pale as she read the words. Her reaction was exactly what I had hoped for. She looked around, confused, her hands shaking. She called me again, but this time, I answered. What's going on, James? Why is the house locked? Why are my things in storage? What happened? Her voice was frantic, like she had no idea what was happening. You know exactly what happened, I said coldly. You've been lying to me for months, Emma. I found the emails. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, she whispered, James, it's not what you think. I don't care what it is. I cut her off. It's over. We're done. Don't contact me again. And with that, I hung up. After I hung up the phone, my hands were still shaking. I felt an odd mix of satisfaction and anger, knowing that I had finally confronted Emma, but also grappling with the reality of how much she had hurt me. The rest of that evening, I stayed in my motel room, ignoring the constant buzzing of my phone. I knew it was Emma. Text after text came through, and each time I refused to read them. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my phone and scrolled through the messages, bracing myself for what I might find. Her first few texts were frantic, pleading for an explanation. James, please, let's talk. I don't know what's happening. I swear, it's not what you think. Just give me a chance to explain. But as I scrolled down, the tone shifted. Her messages became angrier, more accusatory. You're a coward for not talking to me in person. We're supposed to be getting married. You can't just do this to us. You're the one ruining everything. How could you lock me out of our house? I shook my head in disbelief. Her audacity was astonishing. Here she was, the one who had been lying and cheating, and yet somehow, she was trying to turn it around on me. Her manipulation ran deeper than I had ever imagined. After a while, her text stopped, but I could still feel the weight of her words pressing on my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was not done, that this was not over yet, and I was right. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. James, honey, what's going on? She asked, her voice filled with concern. Emma had called my parents. She told them that I had gone missing and locked her out of the house. She played the role of the worried fiancé perfectly, making it seem like I was the one who had suddenly snapped and abandoned her. My parents, of course, had no idea about the emails or the cheating. I'm fine, Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I called off the wedding. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. What? Why? What happened? I took a deep breath. It's a long story. Emma's been cheating on me. With her ex? The silence that followed was heavy, filled with shock and disbelief. Oh, James, I'm so sorry, my mom finally said. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I wasn't ready to talk about it, I replied. But it's over now. Please don't say anything to her. My mom promised to keep quiet, but I knew this was not the end. Emma was going to keep pushing, keep trying to claw her way back into my life. 2 days later, I was packing up to leave the motel. I had taken some time to think, and I decided it was time to move on. I was not going to hide from Emma forever. I had made peace with the fact that the relationship was over, and I was ready to face whatever came next. But just as I was about to leave, something happened that I had not prepared for. There was a knock at my door. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. No one knew where I was staying. At least, no one was supposed to know. Slowly, I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. My stomach dropped. It was Emma. How had she found me? I hesitated for a moment, considering whether I should just ignore her, but I knew that would only delay the inevitable. So, I opened the door. James, please, let me explain, she said, her voice soft, her eyes wide with desperation. I stood there, blocking the doorway, refusing to let her in. There's nothing to explain, Emma. I know everything. Her face crumpled as tears welled up in her eyes. I'm sorry, okay? I messed up. But it wasn't physical, I swear. I haven't seen Felix in years. It was just words. It didn't mean anything. I could feel my anger rising again. Just words? You're seriously trying to tell me that months of explicit messages with your ex didn't mean anything? Do you think I'm stupid? She reached out, trying to grab my arm, but I stepped back. It was a mistake, she pleaded. I was just confused. I love you, James. I was going to marry you. We can fix this. Please, don't throw everything away. I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. You already threw it away, Emma. You chose to betray me. You could have told me if you were unhappy, but instead, you went behind my back. Her tears flowed freely now, but they no longer moved me. The woman standing in front of me was a stranger, someone I could no longer trust. I had loved her once, but that love was gone, destroyed by her lies. I can't do this anymore, I said, my voice firm. It's over. Emma sobbed, trying one last time to beg for forgiveness, but I had made my decision. I closed the door, shutting her out of my life for good. After that final confrontation, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak. It was all still there, but now I had the closure I needed to move on. I packed up my things, left the motel, and decided to stay with my parents for a while. They had been supportive through everything, and I knew I needed time to heal. I also needed time to figure out what was next for me. The wedding was officially canceled. I sent out messages to friends and family, explaining that it was off, but without diving into the messy details. Most people were understanding, though a few close friends asked for more information. I kept it brief, telling them that Emma and I had ended things and that it was for the best. As the weeks passed, I began to rebuild my life. I moved out of the house Emma and I had shared, finding a smaller place of my own. It felt strange, starting over after being with someone for so long, but I knew it was what I needed. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. Emma tried to reach out a few more times, but I ignored every attempt. She even sent me a long email, begging for another chance, but I deleted it without reading the whole thing. I had made up my mind. There was no going back. Looking back now, I realized that finding those emails was a blessing in disguise. It hurt, more than I could ever put into words, but it also saved me from a lifetime of lies. I dodged a bullet, and I was grateful for that. I know it will take time to fully heal, but for now, I am focused on moving forward, one day at a time. I am learning to trust again, and most importantly, I am learning to trust myself. The road ahead is uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I am hopeful. Bye-bye.